If you look up the name Neal Foard on social media, you will see a man standing in front of a black screen wearing a sport coat telling stories. No flashy edits, no animations, no jump cuts, just him, the camera, direct eye contact, telling something very personal. Guess what? It's working. As an award-winning advertising and marketing creative professional with over 3 decades of experience, Neal has crafted successful campaigns for global brands like Budweiser, Lexus, Sony, but recently he has brought that skill set online. A few weeks ago, I asked previous guest Rain Bennett who was one of the best storytellers that he knew, and he said, hands down, it was Neal Foard. When I visited Neal's page, I was shocked how many social media rules he was breaking and how well it was working. So I had him have him on the show to pick his brain about storytelling. And in this conversation, you will hear how Neal developed his storytelling style and has gotten really comfortable in his delivery, how he uses intentional vocabulary and scripts out his ideas, and how he shifts his energy and connects with his audience. You just got to hear this man's stories. This, my friends, is Neal Foard.
When you go back into the history of television, oftentimes the biggest smash hits were rejected by focus groups and they gained a following. They don't come out of the gate a smash hit. What you choose to talk about, the stories that you choose to tell, communicate everything I need to know about you. When you observe yourself telling a story, you learn a lot. The day you get unself-conscious about that, you're about to take an enormous leap forward in quality.
Neal, you came highly recommended from my friend Rain Bennett. I said, who is one of the best storytellers that you know? Because I have been on the hunt, on a kick for learning how to be a better storyteller. And he said, I kid you not, Neal Foard is the best that I have interviewed. He is fantastic and he breaks the mold on social media when it comes to storytelling. And I went and I looked at your profile and everything that I've been taught and a lot of things that I even teach, you were showing us another way and breaking the mold. And I'm like, damn, he's killing it, getting tons of traction, getting very deep engagement by keeping the camera still, by not jump cutting, by not having all the flashy stuff. And I thought it was just a huge testament to the power of storytelling coupled with an incredible, genuine, kind energy. And it was really encouraging for me, Neal, because sometimes I feel like I have to be a certain way to, quote, make it in the marketing space or the storytelling space. And I think you're living and breathing proof that you can go the unconventional path and reap the rewards of it and impact people's lives. I have so many nerdy questions for you about storytelling, so I hope you're buckled in. But thank you for being generous with your time and joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Heather. This is a great treat. I appreciate it.
Let's go. So I didn't know that you were in advertising and a creative director, award-winning. You've worked with huge ass brands and have a very successful career before your TikTok fame and your storytelling fame. I was curious what got you into that world, because sometimes we have a negative connotation with marketers and advertisers and stuff like that. And the word that people always use with you is genuine and sincere. So what was so attractive to you about advertising and marketing?
Advertising, back when I was in the business, when I first started, it was the sort of tail end of Mad Men. It really was. It was showbiz light. It was a way for people to have all the fun of being in the entertainment business without having to pull along with it any of the terrible baggage. I worked with so many great talents over the years doing Super Bowl commercials and so forth. I had the great fortune to work with a lot of actors that you've heard of and discover what lovely people they were in person, what a laugh riot. They used to love advertising because it was incredibly low pressure, despite the fact that it was all the same fun of entertainment. Every once in a while, you'll run into somebody, a celebrity, and I'll give you an example of people that just were absolutely delightful in person. Eli Manning, Peyton's brother, Eli Manning does not get sufficient credit for being just an absolutely fantastic person on camera. We did a campaign for him for the Toyota dealers of New York. And what it was he and Chad Pennington had come into the NFL draft at the same time. And Chad was going to be quarterback for the Jets and Eli Manning was going to be quarterback for the Giants. And so the campaign idea was they were going door to door in the boroughs of New York, trying to win over fans to root for them. And so Chad was this absolutely model, gorgeous, handsome guy with a big head of flowing blonde hair. And he was sort of charming his way into these suburban homeowners. And Eli, he just held up a pie that he'd baked, and he had the pot holders. And after Chad does this incredibly charming introduction, Eli goes, "I baked you a pie," and it was so sweet natured. It was just him 100%. And every time we put him on camera, he was gloriously authentic. He had a knack for being himself on camera, which is a gift. Because you may have noticed, Heather, the way the light goes on and all of a sudden they're playing a role. They're not like, I don't know what they're doing. But Eli was incredibly sweet and authentic and genuine. When I was in advertising, I started to learn again and again that being your real self was the money. That's when you were really connecting, when you were being yourself and not playing some artificial version of yourself that you think that people want. So that was an awfully long answer. I'm not even sure I answered your question.
No, this was a question I was going to actually ask you later, but I'm going to bring it to the top now. And it's kind of deep, but let's just set a foundation before we get into some of the tactics of storytelling, because one of the things I wrote down listening to a lot of your interviews, people would always just use these words to describe you as authentic and genuine. And I know kindness is a big theme through your content. And I'm going to tell you, Neal, I've wrestled a lot with wondering if I would get left behind, just be super honest with you, left behind or overlooked or passed up and so forth, because by nature, I'm not super aggressive. And some of that comes from being a Southern Christian Bible Belt girl who that's in my DNA. And another part of it is fear, et cetera, et cetera. But when I'm like listening to people describe you and I look at your content and your demeanor, I wanted to ask you about how to maintain that and still achieve and succeed in such a competitive field that you've been in your entire career. Maybe this is a misconception and being pessimistic of me, but sometimes that whole idea of like, if you're not aggressive and get yourself to the top and look out for number one, you're not really going to make it or succeed in whatever field. What's your thought process approach around all that? Because it seems like you've been able to maintain your genuineness throughout this whole thing and you have receipts.
So there's like three different dimensions to the answer. I think Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V, said it better than anybody possibly could. He really believes, you can tell he believes this, don't worry about what other people are doing. Don't compete with other people. Just keep banging away at what you do and do it the way you want to do it. And you have to detach yourself from two metrics. The first, you must detach yourself from comparison to others. And two, you must detach yourself from the idea that you're chasing success. What you're really chasing is connection and expression. Let's look at it in a second dimension. Heather, nobody handed us an owner's manual when we were born. Every time you think you've got it figured out, somebody comes along and breaks the rules and demonstrates you don't have to do it any way that you don't want to do it. And one thing that people really lose sight of, and I wish they wouldn't, is we're all in this together. We're all on our own individual journeys. They didn't give us an owner's manual that seems to function right. And therefore, our principal goal as a human being on earth is to help other people. That's your real goal. Other people, I very much enjoy that people will think of me as authentic and genuine, but all I'm trying to do is just leave the commons better than I found it. I'm just the messages that I'm sending, you'll notice how very rarely do I ever say anything negative. And if I say something negative, right, it's to contrast it with something positive. What is the purpose of our being here if not to help other people? So I've stopped worrying about success in a traditional metric. I'm just trying to leave things better than I've found them. And if there's anything that I've learned I'm quite a bit older than you, so let me give you some benefit of decades more of being on Earth. It's this: people are lonely. They're fighting that all the time. The sense that they're in this alone, and they're not in it alone. If they just look around and try to recognize, if you're feeling lonely, that what you have to do is try to solve that problem for somebody else. Just try to be the person that reminds them they're not alone. And you will have done the Earth a great service. Again and again, I posted a video this morning I have these wonderful friends from Sheridan, Wyoming. And there's this cluster of bikers that are just the most gloriously wonderful, artistic, expressive, philosophical. Even they might look like they come out of Central Casting, but in fact, they're all philosopher bikers. And one of them in particular, Brady, told me this story about how he was up in Sturgis at that giant motorcycle rally. And he was helping set it up when he was wrestling with 4 different vehicles trying to get him arranged by himself. One of the batteries went dead on one of these things. So now he's got to jump start it. And along comes this older gentleman who gets in his face and tells him in a very loud voice, "You can't park here." And Brady, he's a former MMA fighter. So he says, I couldn't help it. My subconscious first reaction to this guy was I was measuring the distance between my forehead and the bridge of his nose, wondering how hard I could hit him without literally killing him. And then I thought, oh, no. You fight that instinct. But the second instinct that he had was he's got a kind of an all access pass. He knows all the important people there. And so he was just thinking, I could tell this guy to, basically take that traffic cone and shove it up his backside. And there's nothing he can do about it. But then he thought, as he was going through this checklist of different responses he could give this guy, he said he had something of an out-of-body experience where without consciously doing this, he heard himself saying to this man in a very pleasant demeanor, "Hi, I'm Brady. What's your name?" And the guy was, he was sort of jerked out of his hostility for a second, and involuntarily he introduced himself. And then Brady said, and again, he's hearing this voice coming out of his head. He's not saying this consciously. It's just happening. He goes, "Brother, you have turned up at exactly the right moment. I'm trying to get all these trucks out of this breezeway, and that's the RV battery went dead. And you can help me get this thing started because I need you to start it while I'm revving the other engine. Would you help me out with that?" And the guy went, "Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, you betcha." And by the way, after this, they wound up running into each other a lot at Sturgis. And as it happens, every time they ran into each other, they gave a very pleasant greeting. And he said it wasn't an overestimation to say they were now friends. But when Brady told me this story, we wound up reflecting on that old Abraham Lincoln speech after the American Civil War. It's this beautiful sentiment about how we cannot be enemies. We must not be enemies. We must heal the wounds by being friendly towards one another. And at the very end of this paragraph, Lincoln says, we will respond to the better angels of our nature. And I thought, what a wonderful phrase, the better angels of our nature. Consider how powerful what Lincoln is saying there, that within us, despite our bad impulses, like cracking somebody's nose with your forehead, despite our bad impulses, residing in us are better angels. And it is the better angels, if we would allow them to come out, that will be the solution to our problems. Because consider the alternative scenarios that branched out from Brady's behavior. He might have reacted violently. He might have reacted with hostility, but he didn't, did he? He reacted in peace and friendship and asking for help. And in the first case, he goes to jail. In the second case, he has to walk around with an enemy on the site. Or the third case is he's made a new friend. And I found that story that was told to me so profoundly moving, and I'm glad that I heard it. This is the kind of thing I can't wait to share with the universe, because I believe it improves the commons to be reminded that within each of us resides better angels. And if we only listen to them, that will determine our most peaceful and our most useful and helpful path.
Damn. You just said, I can't wait to share that with the universe. And out of all the things you could lean into, there's, like I said, a through line of humanity and hope and kindness and the positive theme that you have throughout your stories. And sometimes when you have like a big heart for something, like wrapping your arms around it is overwhelming. And how people tell you in storytelling, you kind of got to get small and find the small little things and find the story in that. I'm curious, like how we were just talking about mining for ideas and so forth. Find those moments of hope in your day to come up with stories. Cause I know people say all the time, and maybe it's an excuse, that I don't have that many. I don't have that much stuff to share.
No, you absolutely do. You 100% do. It's a learned skill, though, to write them down, to make a habit of writing them down when they happen to you. And you'd be surprised. Now, I have the benefit of many more decades of life on Earth than you do.
You keep
Heather.
saying that. I'm older than you think I am.
Well, lucky you.
It's some good lighting in here.
You're holding up. But
I'm holding up.
What I have discovered is that oftentimes, if I only contemplate my childhood, if I just go back and try to remember it, I can probably come up with 3 things that I haven't yet spoken about. A great source of stories is who influenced you? Who do you draw inspiration from? Who, in a bad way or a good way, was a meaningful figure in your life? And you will find there's a kind of a unique discovery that I made only very recently. Before my father passed away many years ago, there were 2 things that had happened in our time together that were maybe the most meaningful things that had left me with an impression of who he was. And I remember telling him one day this story about how he had shown up at a baseball game, even though I told him not to. There was a whole story behind that. And I related this incident to him, and he didn't remember it at all. Didn't have any recollection of it. It wasn't because of Alzheimer's or anything like that. It just didn't figure as largely in his life as it did in mine. Yeah. And that's when I realized, our life experiences, our memories are pieces of pottery. They're not photographs. Okay. They are rendered and shaped over the course of many years, recalling them for different reasons. And what I learn again and again is that if you simply go back and go into your memory banks and try to remember certain things that happened and what they meant to you, it's astonishing the new meaning that they have now than they did when they happened. You have the benefit of the concepts marinating in experience.
Before you started sharing your stories on TikTok, were you the type of person at work who was always telling stories and mining story? You were developing that. Yeah.
Yeah, I did it professionally because, as you pointed out before, the larger universe is written in small detail, little things that happen. And, the very, have you noticed there is a thing called the golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, and it's the mathematical rendering of the spiral of the nautilus shell, which also happens to be the pattern that sunflowers and other flowers grow in. And it also happens to be the pattern that galaxies have when they form. These very, very small things in practically quantum size render themselves in the size of galaxies. The universe is very much a case where the small establishes the pattern for the large. And when I was in the profession of advertising, I often had to, in front of clients, thousands of times, explain a concept that we wanted to turn into an advertisement, explain its meaning, and then explain why it would have an effect on people sufficient to change their buying behavior. Well, in the discipline of having to do that thousands of times, you don't even realize what you're learning about how people respond to things. I know you've heard the quote from Joseph Stalin that 1 million deaths is a statistic, a single death is a tragedy. And people they don't really know what numbers mean. What they know is if you can tell them a story about something that they can identify with and that they can see themselves in, what they will do is they will then be able to project onto the larger principle. Oh, I see what he's doing. I see why this ad about a dog hitting the back of a car is meaningful, or why people weep when they see a small case of a child plopping down on the floor. The small is the large that you can grab hold of. I know that's a little bit mysterious. Forgive me.
I love stuff like that.
Go. Heather, I keep I keep veering off of what your real question was. You'll forgive me. You'll have to restore my memory about what it was you were really asking me.
What I love about interview-based shows is questions just spark things and conversations take a life of their own. And I'm so willing to go down whatever trail the conversation wants to go. I was just asking about your storytelling history prior, and you're saying you're having to pitch these ideas to clients and make a case for why this advertisement may or may not work. And what came up for me when you were saying that is, I wonder, is there anything you had to unlearn about presentation and storytelling going to social and telling the stories that you had that maybe worked in advertising but doesn't necessarily work with the story format you have now?
I didn't learn anything going from advertising to social media because I wasn't intending to blow up on social media. The whole origin story about why I wound up on social, on TikTok in particular, was that I wanted to leave some kind of remnant for my kids so that if they ever had children, those kids would know their grandfather. My kids never knew their dad, my dad. They knew their mom's father, and he was a wonderful man, but they never knew my dad. And so I would record these stories about my time with him so that they would understand, the effect he had on me. And both my daughter and my son, they have qualities of my old man. And it's interesting it's the stimulus for stories is to say, this is where I think that came from. And then you discover, it's like, I'm going to tell this story about my own father, and I'm kind of telling the story to my children. And what do you know? Other people out there that see it, they go, yeah, that reminds me of my old man. And then they respond to it. And the way that I'm telling the story is simply the way that I learned to do it in front of board meeting after convention hall, after cubicle.
Yeah.
The discipline of, I can do this in 2.5 minutes. By the way, I'll tell you, kind of one of the reasons that I really truly developed the discipline is that I used to have this boss, the CFO of Saatchi & Saatchi in New York. He was a wickedly smart man, but he was incredibly busy. And he would do this gesture occasionally. If you were talking and he needed you to speed up, he would go, come on, let's go. Get to the point. Bottom line me. Well, his time was so precious. And there were times when I really needed to have him render a decision for me. You couldn't get a meeting with him because he was just always, his schedule was booked. But fortunately, he had this marvelous administrative assistant, this woman from Queens who was just as smart as he was. And I knew that I could get on his calendar if I could make it nice and bite-sized. Like the way that we used to do was I would walk into his office and I would say, Bill, this is going to take 2.5 minutes. I need you to help me make a decision on this. The situation is X. The dilemma is this. If you tell me to do X, I'll do it this way. And if you tell me to do Y, I'll do it that way. Over to you. And I would rehearse. This knowing that I could get it in 2.5 minutes. Now, why would I do that? Because he knew that when I said it's going to take 2.5 minutes, he knows it's going to take 2.5 minutes. He can pack for his trip. He can put on a new shirt. He can make his coffee while I'm telling the story. He knows exactly how long it's going to take. And he knows that I'm going to do it in a 3-act structure. Here's the situation. Here's my dilemma. Here's what I need you to render a decision on. Okay. He knows that I can do it in the time I say I can do it. So I would say to his gal, I need 3.5 minutes of Bill's time. It's to make a decision on this. And then what she would do is she would look for the crack in the schedule. And I would frequently get calls like, if you can get up here in a minute, I can steal 4 minutes of Bill's time for you. And so, okay, what this means is he's always got time for me, because there's always going to be that moment when somebody left the office early, or he's literally about to get into a car to go to the airport or whatnot. And that discipline is really, really good at, and I'm not kidding when I would say I would rehearse to go speak to this man.
I believe
because
you.
if you watch my videos on TikTok or on YouTube or on Instagram, I'm frequently trying to do it in one take. It's one take. It's no cuts. It's staring into the lens. Do you know how many times I have to do that before I get a clean take? It's like 32 times. But that's what I used to do. I used to go, I'm going to get this down. I'm going to walk into Bill's office, tell him how long it's going to take. I put a stopwatch on it. I know how long it's going to take. And imagine if you're in his shoes. He's grateful for the fact that somebody respects his time enough to go, okay, I know exactly what I need you to do. And that discipline has come in very handy in many, many other cases. But it's also made me a little bit impatient when I'm listening to a meandering story about like, okay, where's this going? Do I have time to get a new cup of coffee? Should I go to the bathroom now?
Talk to me about the editing part to that. I know we have a mutual connection, Renee Rodriguez, and when he was on the show a few months ago, he talked about how it's actually harder and he charges more for shorter speeches than longer ones because it takes more work to get things down in a condensed fashion. And here's what I'm curious about, Neal, because I do storytelling at the Moth, and some of the feedback that I get from other storytellers is they're like, yo, you're pacing. You need to slow down a little bit, let things breathe, maybe add a little more details to stuff. And I wrestle with that because I'm also a content creator and I'm used to, getting directly to the point and getting to the meat. And so it's like wrestling with getting to the point, but also adding the humanity and the breath and the life in it. And I think you have such a good pacing with your presentation. And I'm curious, when you're writing out a story, when you have something that you're delivering, how do you temper and balance between cutting it tight, but also to adding in those details, I guess?
Well, first of all, if people are coming up to you and saying slow down and do all this stuff, it's like mind your own beeswax. I am what I am. This is my technique. This is my story. I mean, come on, there are fantastic stand-up comedians who rattle it off, and they're
I talk fast.
Quick. And so where are you from originally? You from Georgia?
I'm from Little Rock, Arkansas, which is not much
Little
better,
Rock.
but
okay.
Southern.
Right.
I'm just Southern. That's it.
Well, it's, I couldn't pick out your accent. Forgive me, because I thought I was pretty good at being able to say the difference between like a Shreveport accent and, like a Northern Florida. But I find your accent quite delightful. And I'm surprised to hear that you say you speak quickly, because that's not a traditional Southern trait. But you choose the pace that you want to speak at, and damn the torpedoes, because this is subjective, douche nozzle. Too fast for you. Okay, fine. Listen faster. Be comfortable. Do you. This is the thing that, again, to return to the concept of authenticity, it's don't focus on that. I teach a storytelling course. I have an online course, storyfire.net. My number one thing above all else is what matters is your motive. What am I trying to do here? Am I trying to be helpful? Then it won't matter how quickly I speak, because people have their own concerns and their own priorities. And what they're going to judge is, am I finding this interesting and useful? I can listen to Southern comedians and Chinese comedians and British comedians, and they all have their own pace. And, just allow yourself not to worry about technique. Worry only about, is this a gift to the people I'm speaking to? Is what I'm telling them useful on a human level to help them understand there's no reason to feel lonely. We're in this journey together. We're on the same piece of carpet briefly. And I'm not here to make myself a star. I'm here to reach out and touch another human being so that I've improved their day and I can feel guiltless about that today. There are, Renee Rodriguez, whom you mentioned,
Yeah.
He's even smarter than he thinks he is. He's even better than he thinks he is. I don't think he realizes how brilliant he is. I know he has an appreciation of how good he is. I know he does because he charges a lot of money, but I don't even think he's aware of how good he is. And his instincts have been so finely tuned by repetition and observation. In other words, he has stood in front of so many audiences that he has internalized what the subsonic signals that audiences are responding to. He can, out of the corner of his eye, see somebody flinch or yawn or something, and he knows how to dial up or dial down the pace. What he will sometimes do is he will say, you know what? I'm going to change direction for a minute. And when he does that, I know what he's doing. He's doing that because he got a signal from the audience that he needs to change direction. And he's good enough to know how to pivot, like he's got places he can go. But because Renee is so good, he's nobody but himself now. He's 100% himself now. And that is a great pinnacle to reach. The idea that I feel no obligation to play a role anymore. I'm just going to be who I am. I'm going to take pleasure in that being my brand. My daughter said something to me. I lost my temper over something. I was trying to get a trademark done, and I was going through the trademark process, and they make you do a bunch of ID things, and then it sends you back to square one. And I lost my temper over that. And she said, Dad, that's very off-brand for you.
She called you
oh,
out.
crap. Now I have to watch myself. I gotta stay on brand. Be peaceful.
you know what's coming up for me when you shared the part about making these videos originally for your kiddos, which, by the way, that's so cool. Can we just talk about how cool it was that you had the foresight to think about that and then also put it on TikTok? I mean, that's such a
that was
cool
my daughter's
move.
idea. That was my daughter's idea. We were literally having pancakes at Good Stuff in PV. And we're sitting there at breakfast, and she said, she really liked that story that I told to my dad and I. It was a very touching story because it was one of those meaningful life moments. And we posted it at the beginning of the breakfast. And by the time we were done, it had already had 150,000 views. And she said, hey, Pop, I think you've gone viral. So we literally spent the rest of the day watching it climb and answering, the comments and so forth. Eventually that thing went on to have, I think, I think it wound up not on TikTok exclusively, but I think if you totaled up Facebook and Instagram and so forth, it was well over 10 million. It was because it was, isn't it strange? It was because it was really for just them, for my children.
That's what I was going to bring up.
Touching a nerve.
Do you know Paul Young who wrote The Shack, that really popular movie and book? Have you heard of him?
No.
He was on the show a couple of years ago.
Young,
Paul Young.
Y-O-U-N-G,
yeah,
or...
William Paul Young, W.P.
Okay.
Young. He wrote this book that, millions of copies is sold. They turned it into a movie that was in theaters. It's real popular. And what's wild about it is when he wrote the manuscript for the book, it was for his kids. He literally just wrote it for his children, and then it got passed around and it became this thing. And when you were telling that story, I was reminded of him, and this came up for me, and I'm curious your response to it. Because us, we like tactics, and we're like, tell me how to start a story and how should I pace it? And we want all the bullet points. But I think what you and him are both proving is getting yourself into this certain state and this certain energy is the most important aspect of storytelling. Because when you can energetically be there and have the right intention, like it's inevitable it's going to land on the right people. And this is a very broad generic statement, but hypothetically, that should be our main concern, is that state and that energy and that intention and that presence. That's what's coming up for me. I'm curious your response to that, whether you agree or disagree.
The best art is what it is. It's not created to be popular. Like, can you imagine how difficult it is to have, say, a sitcom on a cable network, and your job is to maximize the audience size? And when you go back into the history of television, oftentimes the biggest smash hits were rejected by focus groups, or they were mid-season replacements, Or in the case of I Love Lucy, which was one of the absolute juggernauts of its day, it was literally canceled. It was literally canceled after its first season, only for them to discover that in reruns, it was a smash runaway hit.
Right.
And they had to go back to Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball and say, can we have that show back? And they said, it's going to cost you, baby. But Seinfeld was a mid-season replacement. It had focus grouped awfully. It was terrible. Cheers didn't do well. Seinfeld didn't do well. What else? What was it? One of the biggest hits of all time that didn't do it. Repeatedly,
It's a Wonderful Life didn't.
These things didn't focus group well. It's because what you'll find is the things that focus group well are, you can't eat Oreo cookies all day long. And things that are created from an artistic sensibility, or that, that they are what they are, they're different, they're unique. They tend to resonate on a very deep level, and they gain a following. They don't come out of the gate a smash hit. They bounce around for a while and people share them. It's like bands that they never have a number one hit, but they just hang on for decades and decades. Unfortunately, we don't live in the day and age of bands anymore. But I'd like to just return to something for a minute, and that's the idea of not doing something to be popular, doing something to express a sentiment, or your motive is to try to help people not feel alone. As part of my course, I often tell this story. That really happened to me. I was making a U-turn. I took it too tight. I clipped both sidewalls of my left tires, and bang, bang, I had two flats. Damn it. That was the bad news. The good news was I did it within 100 feet of a tire store. So I'm like, okay, well, not a complete disaster. I wobble into this tire store, and while my tires are being replaced, I'm sitting in the waiting room of the tire store with two women who looked like they're, a pollster would have considered them exactly the same person. Same rough age, same basic haircut, roughly the same clothes, same ethnicity. And they were both about 53-year-old women. Now I'm sitting in between them. And on the one side, the one woman is very loudly, with very little self-awareness, telling a friend about an awful experience that she'd had at a restaurant where her order had been gotten wrong twice, and she was fairly persuaded that the waiter had gotten the order wrong the second time on purpose. And she was very upset, and she had complained to the manager, and the manager had been so unresponsive that, to her pleas to have the waiter fired, that she had decided to go on the warpath and write a scathing Yelp review and probably put up signs on the telephone poles adjacent to the restaurant, discouraging anybody from using that restaurant. So she hangs up the phone. And about 30 seconds after this woman hangs up the phone, the other woman said, with a very gentle demeanor, she says it to me, I had a wonderful experience at a restaurant yesterday. I was having coffee and I was looking out the front window, and along comes this very pretty young woman with a big dog. And she's walking this dog, and she notices that there is an elderly man in the crosswalk, and he doesn't want to cross the street because it's a very big boulevard, and he's frightened that that it won't last long enough for him to make it all the way. So this young woman, without being asked, takes him by the arm, and the two of them walk across the street while the dog patrols in front of the cars to make sure that nobody gets any crazy ideas. And they reach the other side of the street, and I thought, oh, how lovely. And then they keep talking, and this conversation goes on for a while, and then they just decide to walk on, the two of them, hand in hand. Isn't that beautiful? And I said, in a very loud voice, yes, it is. And it became clear to me that the woman had told me that story to decontaminate me from the earlier story, that she had done it to restore my balance, that the world isn't an awful place filled with, heathens trying to destroy my meal. Now, I offer this question to you. Who would you rather spend the day with? It's not a tough decision, is it? One person is farting their grievances into my life, and the other one is trying to detoxify me. Okay. Now, why do I tell that story? Because what you choose to talk about, the stories that you choose to tell, communicate everything I need to know about you. What are your priorities? Who are you? Why have you decided to tell me this story? What is your motive? What is your attitude about life? All of these things get communicated in your choice of topic. And even the tone of voice that she was using as she told me that story was very, I wouldn't call it grandmotherly, but it was like your favorite aunt telling you about something wonderful that had happened. And in the telling, she could smile, and she would, all these little affectations about looking out the front window, the dog patrolling in front of the cars, you can see it because she's saying it with love and affection, And now contrast that with the other story. Can I see it? Yeah, I can see it, but I'm not seeing it the way you're telling it. Like you can imagine the look on the waiter's face as they are suffering from this woman, thinking this order is not right, and my glasses were broken in the kerfuffle, and it's just, we communicate.
Do you write these down?
Oh, hell yeah.
All this stuff down?
Word for word. Yeah.
Word for word, like everything that's
word
in
for
your
word.
reels and stuff. Word for word. Why?
Well, and it was an affectation that I got from going to the CFO and having to have this down to 2 minutes and 22 seconds. You got to know exactly the word choices you're going to use. There's a benefit, by the way, to writing it down. You tend not to repeat yourself. In one case, you'll describe something as a person was angry, and in the next iteration, you'll say they were vibrating with frustration. And then the next time you talk about it, they'll say, I think they literally ground their teeth down. So you can do that when you write it down. You can choose words that become vivid and non-repetitive. And there's another secret to that, by the way. If you do write it down and you are colorful with your language, it gives people, you get more credit for intelligence than you would have gotten otherwise, because it makes it seem like your vocabulary is larger because you just happen to have the perfect word at your elbow. No, I looked it up. I was looking for synonyms for, like, you think kerfuffle just came out of my mouth? No. That I looked for that word. I looked for a word that was amusing in its sound, so that I could, that instead of just saying, like, another one of those is a fracas, right? A Donnybrook.
For my life.
So I go in search of those words.
But okay, so a minute ago you were talking about keeping it real, being yourself, doing things the way that you do it. And I've been kind of wrestling with the line. I just recently started writing down all my stories, my scripts, like really getting heavy into the discipline of that. For anything else, I think it's just good for me to practice slowing down a little bit and thinking real critically of the words that I'm using. But then there's a point where you're like, to hell with it. This is it. And this is what it is. And I'm going to just deliver it a little bit and perfectly, a little Southern, a little hyper, a little whatever the way it is. And I'm curious how you approach the professionalism in it and the getting better and the craft with also to the imperfection and the authenticity and so forth. Like, when do you let something go and how hard do you like chip it away before you deliver it?
My videos all have a look for the most part. They're all this black background.
Yes.
The background you see behind me, that's my black background. It has that background. I generally will wear a suit coat and a pocket square. The purpose of this, it's a brand standard. It's, you recognize the brand immediately upon seeing it, like, who it is and what it is. Okay. And no, it's not for everyone, definitely. A lot of people find it too slick and they think it's an advertisement, and then it turns them off because they're like, okay, this is somebody trying to sell me crypto. So, but it's a brand for me. And I'll tell you the reason that I use the black background and what the affectation is about. And it's because one thing that I learned whenever I was giving presentations to a group of people, if I had slides up, and I frequently use slides to accompany a presentation that I'm making. If I had slides up, there was going to be a certain time when I needed them to take their eyes off the slides and just focus on me for a minute. Wow. Just give me a chance to talk to you as a person. Well, I had this marvelous little remote, and if you hit the square dot on the remote, the screen would go black. And you could see it. If you were in my shoes and you were looking at the audience, you could see that all of the eyes would go like this. Okay. And that was exactly what I wanted. I knew that if I isolated and there was nothing else to look at, they had no choice. They had to look at me. And then I had them. And I would do it for punchlines and I would do it for stories. and I would do it to emphasize certain points. And the black background was to say, you don't know where I am. There's nothing else to look at. So I guess I'm stuck with you. And then all of your expressions become germane. They become relevant. Every vocal tick, every pause becomes part of the delivery, part of the tale.
Yeah.
And so the black background, I'm sort of stuck with it in a way because it's a brand standard.
Yeah.
But in another way, I stand by it because, yeah, this is a story that I'm going to tell you, and there isn't going to be a huge amount of adornment. And why am I doing this way? Because the art of storytelling, it should be just your ability to be on an elevator with somebody and make them smile or laugh or weep. And this is a very old, it's a more than 100,000-year-old science of human being operating system being. I'll tell you something that I frequently tell people, which is if I gave you I give you 3 bullet points to remember, and so that at the end of this podcast interview, I say, okay, can you spit back at me what those bullet points were? And you might be able to remember one, maybe. But the last time you heard the tale of the tortoise and the hare was probably when you were 13, and you have not forgotten it. You could tell it to me right now, roughly with some accuracy. What can we learn from that? That stories are the human operating system. It's how we remember things. It's how we understand things, context. It's the context of the numbers. In the age of AI, it becomes more important that you are able to communicate something that has emotional resonance. Because AI, these large language models, they're just scraping the average. They collate everything. And what do they spit out? An anodyne, average, unremarkable series of bullet points or arguments. Well, guess what? People are very logic resistant. Human beings are logic resistant. What you have to do in order to persuade anybody of anything is make them want to be persuaded. And the only way they'll do that is if they feel safe around you. And they'll feel safe around you if they go, oh, it's another human being. It's a real human being.
Yeah.
That is not here to victimize me or fleece me or try to get me involved in a scam. They're just relating their human experience so that I understand I'm not in this alone. It's more important now because of AI that we learn the skill of establishing an emotional connection so that people will be willing to change their minds.
I think you've said people feel alone 3 times at minimal during this conversation. And I know that comes from somewhere, that revelation, that conviction. Do you know where?
Well, in advertising, we learned it again and again and again and again.
Really?
That almost all of human behavior is related to the tension between getting along with everybody and getting ahead of everybody. And we are craving the approval of our parents. And people who achieve phenomenal things through extraordinary effort are often, I don't know if it's always, but they are often driven by a childhood trauma. The fact that their parents didn't pay enough attention, or they could only get their approval if they, achieved certain things. And I can't honestly say that they are happy. They're certainly reaping the rewards of their effort. How would you like to be that Pakistani javelin thrower right now? Have you seen the footage of the welcome he got back in Pakistan? Holy crap. It was a great thing that he achieved for Pakistan. And they felt it. They felt it on a deeply emotional level. Pakistan is a nation of achievers, of brilliant, high achieving, intellectually capable, scientifically savvy. Pakistan is a proud country. And when you give them evidence, when you give them something to be proud of, the eruption of emotional overflow is supernatural. The hero's welcome that man got in Pakistan was, to me, a perfect example of people who crave the feeling of belonging to something meaningful. And we all do it. We all do it. Notice this. Okay. Somebody wins Wimbledon or they win some stupendous singular achievement. People will go, "Oh, how nice for you. What a great thing that you won Wimbledon, or that you won some individual event." But as soon as they win something that's a team sport, then what do they say? We won.
Yeah.
They they feel like they own a little piece of it. Like the only time when you see, say, the Giants win the Super Bowl, or can you, if the next time Dallas Cowboys win the Super Bowl, you will see a parade of such epic proportions, and they will say, "We won." The 1980 American Olympic hockey team, when they beat the Soviets, it was a national purging of toxicity. It was a national glory, and everybody said, "We won." Well, I don't remember you on the ice vomiting after a practice, but we take credit for it. It's because when you feel like you're part of something, it is a great cleansing of loneliness. It is a feeling that you belong. This is why I stress again and again, you must never try to achieve something at the expense of somebody else, because you will lose the part of the gift of achievement. You will lose other people's joy at your achievement if you do it by victimizing other people. You will never be happy with your success if you have done it at the expense of others, because it is a primary human drive to belong. Therefore, the messages I'm always sending out in the universe is that I say this out of love and affection for my fellow human beings. I'm trying to leave this place better than I found it. I do have my critics. There are, every once in a while, there'll be a negative comment, and it stings, but
sure,
the vast majority of the comments are very restorative, and they see what I'm trying to do. And even if they don't particularly like the story, they understand the motive. And so that makes them feel good that there's somebody else out there trying to share the better side, the better angels of our nature.
We're at the top of the hour. Do you have 5 more minutes?
Oh, I got all the time in the world for you.
Okay. I just want to make sure
yeah.
If you have
you're not abusing you're not abusing my
Okay. Thank you. You're so kind. I'm guessing, I could be wrong, this could be just an assumption, you seem like kind of a spiritual dude to kind of spill for some of this stuff. And I'm just curious about like groundedness, because, I'd say most folks would argue like they go into building a platform or whatever for some mission. I want to help people with depression. It's their story. It's attachment to their story, what's happened, and they want to pay it forward and help. And all my friends, all the people I roll with are creators at various levels and communicators. And a reoccurring theme that I've experienced, and I know my friends have, is just really trying to stay grounded in the first thing, the why, the reason we started all this. And when you start getting hits with millions of views and comments and opinions and the rat race and the algorithms, there is, regardless of our best intentions or not, a pull towards growth and whatever, and keeping very grounded in your calling, what I believe is a calling on your life, man. I'm just curious, do you have any spiritual practices or ways around that when maybe you see Neal kind of maybe gearing off a little bit this way or getting distracted, how you bring yourself back to center?
I'm kind of lucky in that I haven't really broken through. There's a benefit to not getting, so I have something of a following, but it's very small. I'm like a band out of Bakersfield that's huge in Bakersfield.
Yeah, those are the best though.
Right? Yeah. I have my little pocket.
I
have not cracked through, and it doesn't look like I'm gonna. There's just something, I can sort of feel the vibe, like I've reached my max. The beauty of that is I will never be able to brag about what a big shot I am. I'm just not that big. Once I'm okay with that I'm not a big shot, now that I've made peace with that, then I don't feel obliged to chase anything. It just is what it is. There are these cases that I find incredibly amusing, Heather, where like some band out of Orange County, California will be like a surf punk band, or they'll have some kind of version of ska that they do. Okay. And they were big. They were sort of semi-big for a time. They could get to the top of the marquee at a decent club in Orange County or in LA. And, but they never broke through. They never cracked the top 40. And then one day, long after the band is broken up, they'll find out they're like number one on the charts in Brazil. Mm-hmm. And they'll go, what? Yeah. How? Yeah. And they'll find out that some Japanese surfer who picked up a bootleg tape in Dana Point went back to Japan, and then his crew of Japanese surfers wound up in Rio de Janeiro surfing, and the tape got bootlegged again, and then they became a hit. And that's sort of about the best I can hope for, is that someday I'm big in Brazil. You know what I mean? Like, so if you're asking how I stay grounded, it's like, I don't have any alternative. I can't be an egomaniac. There's nothing there. There's no success.
Well, so I would argue with that. I would definitely push back on that. But I think what's coming up for you when you say that is just this willingness to, like you said at the very beginning, keep the main thing and let go of this pressure to quote, make it big and to prove ourselves and to lean into that childhood trauma and serve other people. And that's how you stay grounded.
I'm never going to crack it. So beauty of it is, but here's another thing. And this would be something like Gary Vaynerchuk would say. I'm certainly like a Simon Sinek guy. Is it like pretend for the sake of argument, Simon Sinek stops getting speaking gigs. He's still going to keep doing what he's doing. He's still going to keep writing books. Yeah. You're not going to stop him. You know why you're not going to stop him? Because he believes in what he's doing. And come on. And it's the same thing for me. I'm not going to, okay. So I only get a couple hundred views. I ain't stopping. I'm not stopping. Come on.
I feel that. One more tactical question, then I'll let you go out of here. You talked about creative restriction, creative branding earlier with you standing with the black background. And I'm kind of similar. I sit in a chair and tell stories on Instagram, and I've really grown to love that for reasons I didn't know I would. And one of them being, I feel like I'm learning more about storytelling through restriction because I'm not allowed to stand up. I sit in one spot. I tell the same kind of format. And so all this weird stuff's coming up for me that I'm learning about delivery and et cetera, that I don't think would have come up if I hadn't had that restriction there. And I'm curious, with you standing in front of a black wall, wearing the same type of suit, delivering the same type of story in the same amount of format, what nuances in delivery or writing have you learned about storytelling through that specific restriction?
When you observe yourself telling a story, you learn a lot. And because
I don't want to watch myself.
Well, that's why people don't do it, is because it's uncomfortable. The day that you can get comfortable watching, I coach a lot of executives who are, like CEOs about to do an earnings call, or CEOs who have to deliver bad news. And I'll coach these people and I'll say, look, you have to film yourself. You got to put the camera in front of you, and you got to do your speech, and you have to watch it. And you're thinking, I don't want to do that because it's really uncomfortable. It makes me self-conscious. Brother, the day you get unself-conscious about that, you're about to take an enormous leap forward in quality, because you're going to tune up all the things you're doing wrong, the things you don't like. Where does confidence come from? Confidence comes from feeling like you're pretty good at something. Let's just pretend that, Heather, you meet you see an attractive stranger, and you just can't help yourself. You're thinking, I'm not going to let them walk out of here without me saying hello. I'm just not going to do it. And you're just about to do this. So in order to rev yourself up, now your self-talk becomes really important. Like, you don't say things like, I'm no good at this, or, oh, I'm so nervous. Don't. What you do say in your self-talk is, I am going to enjoy this. Come hell or high water, I'm doing it. And I'm going to enjoy this. I'm going to laugh about this later, whatever happens. Maybe this is something I'm going to tell our grandchildren. I'm going to say, I typically don't do this, but I can't stop myself. So here we go. Now, that self-talk of, there are no consequences that I cannot live with here. I'm not letting them out of here without saying something. The beauty of something like that is that it's going to radiate a kind of perverse confidence. When you don't care what happens, it's incredibly empowering. And this tactic, the self-talk of, I'm going to do this one way or the other, and I'm going to live with the consequences, come what they may. This may happen to you. There have been times lately when something that I would have interpreted as a kind of miniature disaster, where I have said to myself, this is going to make a good story. And it completely changed my perspective on the event, because now I went, oh, that's going in the book. You know, that's good.
I love
that's pretty
that.
good. Yeah. Because now it's all stories now. And what has happened is, I'll give you a great example. I lost a crown on a molar and I had to go to the dentist. And if I was ever a prisoner of war, it would take you 14 seconds to get every secret out of me. Because when I hear the drill, I am over the moon with stress. God bless this dentist, this young guy, lovely guy, young dentist. He totally got it. I said, brother, I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. I'm sorry. I can't control it. I'm just super stressed out about this. And he goes, no, you're fine. You're fine. And I go, yeah, but if you're thinking that because of my stress, you need to take less time, no, you take your time. It's just that this is how I am. And he was just the sweetest guy. And he really managed me through the process. And his dental, what do they call the hygienist, that's there to assist? She was fabulous too. She was fabulous. All right. She was muttering behind her mask. I don't know what she was saying, but whatever it was, I knew it was meant to be calming. Okay. So, I don't know what she could be speaking Chinese for all I care. All right. Why do I tell that story? Because I knew in the moment that this was going to be a story, that the dentist's fabulous bedside manner was half of his success was he was a great dentist. No complaints about the new crown, but 100% I'm going back to him with no fear. And anytime I have an appointment with that guy, I'm looking forward to it. This is as good as you can do. Okay. So you can see how that transforms the experience in the moment.
Right.
I'm thinking this is going to be a story, and it shades your life experience.
I was just going to say, what a fun way to approach life and a way to take a little of the stress and the pressure, even if you're not a professional storyteller, whatever.
It helps in airports. It helps a lot in airports. No, for real. Oh, do you have time? Can I tell a story? I know it's one of the stories that I often tell, which is that I do truthfully, I keep these in my pocket. I keep these in my pocket. All right. And I'll usually have 2 or 3 of these. Why would I do that? Because I like to keep these things for baristas and servers.
They're trolls, right?
Yeah, the little troll dolls.
Yeah.
And especially I like the ones with the pink hair. So I keep them because it's just a little funny little thing to make a barista smile. Well, I gave one to my friend Marcus, who is, among other things, he was a great commercials director, and he was also a bit of an improv actor, fabulous, larger than life figure. We're in the airport. This is on one of those days when they've canceled a lot of flights. Something happened in Des Moines, and the next thing you know, the shock wave is being felt at LAX. So all these canceled flights. The people that are in the airport, they do not understand that the frontline workers have nothing to do with the problem. They're just there to absorb your abuse and try to do the best they can at keeping things in an orderly fashion. Mm-hmm. Well, the couple ahead of us and the baggage, and we're getting ready to check bags, the couple ahead of us is just being insufferable swamp donkeys. And they're being very condescending to the woman behind the counter. And I mean, she's done with the human race. You could just see on her face.
Yeah.
She has disconnected from, caring about anybody. Well, eventually this couple slithers off and we get up to the front, and before she can say anything, Marcus pulls out one of these trolls that I'd given him, and he goes, "Oh, Bjarki saw the whole thing, and they are in big trouble now, baby." And the woman goes, "What?" And he goes, "All the trolls know each other. And he's going to tell all his friends what a couple of jerks they are. You do not want to be on the receiving end of the trolls, baby. They're going to take their revenge big time. Oh, by the way, if you feed him before the sun goes down, he'll do anything you want to them." Oh, so his favorite food, and he pulls out these M&Ms. He goes, "These are his favorite. So there you go. And he gives her this, I'm like, why the Swedish accent? I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, no joke.
So she has this look on her face, like she's smiling, obviously. And she takes the M&Ms and she turns to her colleague who has overheard this because it's so freakish. And the colleague, his eyes are like, ooh, we've got the hack of all hacks. We have the revenge troll. Okay. So here's what happened. So she works on us and then we leave and she's smiling. And I know that the next people coming up to the line, she's going to greet him with a smile. What happened, I didn't discover this until Marcus did this. What he did was he jerked the toilet chain and he flushed the last memory out. There is no more. These turds are gone. And he restored balance to the universe. And I thought, oh, that's fantastic. What a great trick that he has wiped the chalkboard clean. And now this woman in customer service in the airport is, I'm not saying she's all the way back to loving people, but he wiped them clean. Okay. And you know that what's going to happen is all of her colleagues are going to say, what's the story with the doll? Why the M&Ms? She's going to explain the whole story. Oh. You know they're going to put an M&M in front of that thing before the night shift. You just know they're going to do that. It's going to go around. It's going to make the rounds. So Marcus inadvertently created a chain of events that is much larger than that couple of douchebags. And to me, that kind of disruptive gesture of the little thing, it's so disruptive. You could make an argument that Marcus and I had a terrible time at the airport that day. Because we had to deal with the delays and there was a lot of hassle and the line through security was a joke. But we never got upset because all we talked about for the rest of the day was the look on that woman's face when he handed her the M&Ms. You can see how it transformed our experience. It transformed their experience. And for the rest of the airport trip, nothing bugged us. We knew what to do.
What a cool opportunity, mission. I mean, think even about our content, like viewing these little disruptions throughout the day and the opportunity to shift energy. And I know it may just quote be for one person, but the ripple effect of that is so powerful. I have a final question for you, but first of all, you were so generous with your time. You didn't have to say yes to some Southern stranger.
It's part of my lack of success
on the internet.
Heather, I have time. That's the problem. So it's not as generous as you think, although please go ahead and assume that.
You're going to stop. This is hilarious. But also, too, I wanted to thank you for being a light on the internet. And I know that
thank you.
You may not, quote, seem like you have whatever, you said about not having a big following, which is not true at all. But the impact that you have on people's lives. We were talking about this yesterday, the amount of times we scroll TikTok and watch things. We don't comment, we don't interact, but we listen to it. So you have no idea how many people are actually taking in your message and what it's doing for their lives. So thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for your generosity today. You have storytelling courses. There's a couple of levels there. We'll obviously have your content linked up in the show notes. Is there anything specifically you want to direct people towards, though?
I happen to really believe in the course. It comes in 3 levels. There's a basic level of fundamentals, and then there's a complete level, and then there's a Storyfire Pro. And the beauty of the Storyfire Pro level, which is not expensive as these courses go, is that we have bi-weekly calls. And in the calls, we do like what we're doing right now. We talk about, what makes stories good. And it's really nice for people to kind of pitch up, tell a story, and then have people critique it and so forth. So I urge your listeners to go check it out because I think it may be immodestly. I think it's a freaking bargain. So it's 30 years of experience doing this, here,
right.
Here, $250. I'll give you the benefit of my entire distilled experience. And then on top of that, we'll have calls every couple of weeks. But
that's incredible. That's incredible. That will be linked in the show notes. Please check that out. Also give him a follow, watch his storytelling. I'm curious with you, Neal. Last question.
Okay.
It's a question about questions. What is something in your life right now? It can be on a professional side. It can be on a personal that you are deeply questioning.
Oh, let me see if I'm getting you right. There's a sentiment that if you're not changing your opinion about something important every year, if you don't have at least one thing you changed your opinion on in a year, you're not growing, because all of us walk around so wrong about so many things that if you're not self-correcting, you're not being aggressive enough about seeking out information or new experiences. So what I would question is, it's like, ooh, what is that thing I need to change my opinion about? And I don't really have it yet, but I think that might be now that you've stimulated this thought, I think I'll go in search of that today. I'll do a video on it.
You said that was one of the roles of persuasion, is entering into a conversation where people know and you are willing to change your mind. That is persuasion.
Yeah. It's people won't change their mind unless they feel safe to change their mind. They cannot feel that by changing their mind, you've won. They won't do it. They will not do that.
Yeah.
This is why facts are so unpersuasive. You can confront someone. It's like, wow, this is why that happened. And you go, well, no, here are the actual facts. I'll show you the video. You can see it yourself. It will not change their opinion a jot, because you're right and they're wrong. Therefore, in conversation, the quickest way you can get to a state where people are willing to change their mind is when you are willing to change your mind. You are willing to listen sufficiently to go, oh, if that's true, that would change my opinion. I don't think enough people appreciate that you can't go into the world to win. You must go into the world to learn. I spent 2 years in Hong Kong, and I was humiliated by all the things I didn't know. I wasn't a Chernobyl style meltdown, but I was not a good value from my employer. And when you become humbled by how much you don't know, by the things you don't understand, by the things that a year or 2 years later you are still cringing about that you did, that humility makes you, in the long run, it makes you a better person to understand that there's still a lot to learn. And I think it makes me more persuasive to be able to say, well, I know I'm not, and that I will never walk into a room anymore thinking that I know what the hell's going on.
Neal Foard, everybody, thank you so much for your time. This was incredible.
Here we go. This has been fun. I have all my signs.
Awesome. What is that? Okay, so you're going, for some reason it's glitching.
This means pissed off for greatness in Chinese, by the way.
That's hilarious. That's awesome.